I'm here to talk about life, specifically life as a highly neurotic person. Now, I've tested myself on the Big 5 personality test model and I come up in the 90-something percentile of neurotics, of neuroticism, which is basically the scale that determines how much stress and disruption you can deal with and how sort of risk averse you are and how your brain basically assesses danger, things like that. And yeah, I'm an anxious person, I'm a sensitive person. I have to deal with being that way inclined on a day-to-day basis. But it's one of these personality traits that no one can see, no one's going to give you credit for. People are just going to say, no, you can fix it, you can change it, you know, you're just being over dramatic, you're just being too sensitive, you're just overthinking, you know, that kind of stuff. But I don't know, I actually think that this is an ingrained part of personality, you know, to be someone who potentially can worry a lot. And for me personally, I have to find ways to deal with that. And, you know, it's not easy. But yeah, I just wanted to give a little status update, just talking about my week now. I kind of feel like I've been on a kind of weird up and down roller coaster. I know it sounds cliche, but yeah, I've had this kind of weird couple of months, I guess you could say, of, you know, getting really depressed, like literally going through a really bad depressive episode where, you know, I barely could get out of bed in the morning. I just felt so sorry for myself. And, you know, that's nothing new. I was diagnosed with chronic depression in my teens, and it's something that I'm having to constantly deal with, and no doubt will have to constantly deal with for the rest of my life. I've sort of come to terms with it. Luckily, I'm old enough now to know that that stuff will happen. You know, I will go through these ebbs and flows of feeling depressed, and, you know, I'll get over it. I always do, but I always at the same time know that I'm going to be due another bout of it at some point to more or lesser degrees. So yeah, I was going through a bad patch about a month ago. It only took about 3 or 4 days, and I gradually felt like I was starting to recover. Luckily, that was quite a quick one, you know, going from that kind of absolute state of despair where you genuinely consider ending it all and just hating every facet of life to feeling as though perhaps things aren't so bad. It's such a weird thing, I think, for people that don't regularly have to deal with stuff like that. They just would never know what it's like. And for people that do, you know, I feel your sympathy. I know exactly what it's like to have to deal with these kind of episodes of feeling like absolute dog shit, and sometimes for no real reason, you know, because bad things happen to people all the time. You know, there's always going to be problems, and as human beings, we all have to figure out a way to deal with it as best we can. And, you know, pain and suffering is just an inevitable part of life. We're going to have to deal with it at some point, and some people are going to find that harder than others, and some people are just going to find it really hard. Some people are going to find it really hard constantly all throughout their lives. Some people are just going to have 1-2 episodes where they're, you know, they just get to the end of their tether. You know, they bottle things up, and then finally by the time they reach their 50s or something, they have a huge meltdown or something. You know, it's different for everyone, and I can't talk for everyone. I can only really talk for myself and talk about my own experiences, which is why I'm here. So yeah, had a bad time, started to get over it. And over the last month, I've had sort of ups and downs since then. Let's just take this week, for example. Let's just take yesterday. So yesterday, it was one of these weird things where I felt anxious. I felt this feeling. I always get this anxious feeling. It's about 2 to 3 inches above my belly button. It's kind of, some people would call it butterflies or excitement or anxiety. It doesn't feel good. And I don't know why it happened. I don't know why it ever happened. I think, was it a lack of sleep? Was it the fact that I'm a little bit under the weather? For the last week, I felt a bit ill, like I've been on the verge of getting like a flu. You know, I've had like a low level cold for the last week, bit of a sore throat, bit of a sort of tight chest, stuff like that. Just generally feeling a bit ill this week. So could it be that? But then why did I feel worse yesterday compared to now? And I still feel like I have that issue now. You know, I still feel like, well, a couple of days prior, you know, I felt a bit ill then, but I didn't feel this kind of weird anxiety thing. And I'm just bringing this up because it's weird. I think some people, they're more in touch with their physiology and their bodily signals, and they can kind of determine the thing that's making them feel down or anxious or whatever it is. You know, it's quite apparent. For me, it's not so much. I just inhabit me, and if I'm having a bad day, I'm just having a bad day. I can't ever really put my finger on why. I'm just too busy trying to deal with the bad day. But yeah, I just thought, isn't it weird? Like, you have these days where, like I said, there wasn't really anything specific that I can really pinpoint that made me feel really bad or would warrant make me feel really bad. Like yesterday when I had all this anxiety, like in the pit of my stomach, if you want to call it that. And I don't really have that now. I mean, I can think of a few bad things that did happen. So as part of my work, part of my job, I refurbish printers. It's like a part-time side hustle, I suppose you could say. And I sold a printer that I'd refurbished. It all worked perfectly. Tested it just, you know, on the day of selling it to somebody. They were really happy to have it. They paid me obviously more than I bought it for. That's how I do the side hustle. And later that week, they basically said it's not working. They can't get it to work and they want a refund. And these are quite big, large format printers whereby a refund means having to arrange couriers, and it's not, you know, it's not like repacking up a DVD that you've sold on eBay and it, you know, it doesn't play in someone's DVD player, if people still have DVD players anymore. But yeah, it's not so easy to just stick it in a bubble wrapped jiffy bag and send it back in the post. So perhaps I was a bit distressed by having to deal with the refund, and not only that, but knowing that that was basically a third, the money I made off the sale of this printer was basically a third of my monthly income. And now I know that I will have to, upon return, have to give that back to the customer. And I'm left with a product which may or may not work. I don't know what's wrong with it. I won't be able to diagnose it until I check it out and see what's wrong with it. It's just annoying, you know. I guess it would be the same if you're like a car salesman and, you know, you finally sell this car that's been sitting on the showroom floor or the forecourt for the last, you know, 3 years, and you think, oh, when the hell am I going to sell this car? You know, I just need to get shot of this thing, because, you know, just having a car, you know, it kind of costs you money in sort of depreciation value, and the longer you sit on an item, the more it kind of loses value until it's finally sold, stuff like that. So yeah, I thought maybe the whole dealing with that might have been an issue. I think, you know, as I've said recently in like my previous video, money is a problem. When you're, you know, I don't know if I'm too ashamed to say this, but I think I'm going to say it. When you're poor like me, you know, I don't earn what the average person in this country earns. I earn far less, maybe a third less, maybe not even that this year. I've been really struggling for money, as I'm sure everyone has, but, you know, it's hard when you're really struggling, yet you still somehow, you know, can pay the bills compared to when you're not anyway. I won't go into it too much, but suffice to say, I've not been making a lot of money. So any time where there's a big bill, even if it's like a return on an item that I'd sold as part of a side hustle that makes up part of my income, it's just stress, you know. And I didn't know whether that made me stressed enough to give me this kind of weird anxiety feeling. Like it wasn't just stress like you'd normally experience. This thing I had yesterday, like it started to feel like it escalated beyond that feeling in my stomach, and was making me kind of quite depressed, to the point where I was almost struggling not to just burst out in tears, which is weird because I'm not really a crier so much, you know, on a day-to-day basis. I'm a pretty analytical, rational, critical, thinky type of person. I'm not typically very emotional all the time, although I do have this kind of very deep, empathetic, feely kind of side to my personality, I suppose, that it's kind of, I kind of lock it away a bit, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, it's just one of these weird feelings where it's like, okay, yeah, just every day you have these ebbs and flows and you don't really know why. Like, I'm just speculating that, because of certain money worries, that's why I'm stressed, and that's why I was as stressed as I was yesterday. But I'm talking about yesterday because today I've not felt that. I've not felt quite as bad. And it's so weird when you're stressed, for me anyway, I feel like this is how I always am. I feel like this is, when I'm stressed, I can almost feel like, well, this is how I was yesterday. This is how I was the day before. This is how I've been for my entire life. But when I'm not stressed, I almost forget what it's like to be stressed. I don't know if anyone else has this, but it's just a weird phenomena I've noticed. Like I say, I inhabit my mood, and that feels like a reflection of how I always feel. But then it's only once my mood changes to a different type that I feel like that is how I always feel. You kind of just get used to your own mood. Moods and things are such a weird thing, like, because like I say, I don't know, maybe it was my diet yesterday, maybe it was my diet from the day before, maybe I just ate something weird and my microbiome, my gut bacteria just decided to, send some weird, anxiety signals to my brain for some reason. I don't know, it could be. Maybe I'm sort of allergic to something and I eat it, and that is what does it. I don't know. Specifically yesterday, I did go for a fairly long walk, so I don't think it's through lack of exercise. When you run through the reasons why you're feeling anxious, sometimes it is just needing to get out and move your body and move through space, and that can actually be quite a good remedy. So it's worth checking those things off the list, but it's so weird when you can't really put your finger on it. When you sort of, you live a sort of fairly consistent life, and yeah, some days you'll eat a pizza or something, and it's not good for you, but you eat it, and some weeks, most weeks, perhaps you'll be fine. Perhaps other weeks you'll not be fine, and the day after you'll feel a bit hungover or a bit anxious or something, and you think, was it the pizza? Was it not? I don't know. It's always hard to put your finger on exactly why you feel the way you do sometimes, or that's how I feel about myself. So yeah, it's been a bit of a weird week, and yeah, just going back to something I said in a few previous videos. So I've worked as a part-time semi-professional artist on and off for the last couple of decades, artist, designer, freelance, self-employed, always struggled to make it into a full-time career. So I've kind of had to do other things to sort of supplement my income, like I say, the side hustle selling printers, or at other times it was like I worked as a carer for a bit. I worked in a sort of like shelf stacking in a warehouse type thing for a little bit. I worked as a pizza maker in a chain of pizza places. Yeah, a pizza chain people know begins with P. I don't know if I'll say it. And no, it wasn't Pizza Hut. It was a different one. So I worked there for a bit. Then did a little bit of delivery driving. I worked behind a bar for a bit. Yeah, which was like completely the wrong sort of environment for a highly neurotic introvert like me. But, you do what you feel like you've got to do at the time. And sometimes it's like, it's one of these things where I actually feel really proud of that. Some people think, oh, these are just shit little jobs, poor you having to work behind a bar. God, luckily me, I went to university and I got my MA, my PhD, my BA, BSA, whatever. I got some degree, and that fast tracked me straight into some, high flying position. Good for them. But I actually think there's something to be said for working those quote unquote shit jobs, because I think you learn a lot about yourself doing those types of jobs, and you learn a lot more than if you just go straight into the cushy office job. I think everyone should do a shit job at some time, and it took me a while. Like, I didn't do it throughout my teens. I don't think I had a job in my teens. I never did a paper round back in the day when newspapers were a thing. Yeah, I don't think that, the paper boys still exist. I don't think they do anymore. But fruit picking, that was something that happened in farms in the summer. I never did any fruit picking. Yeah, I never did the working in as a barista or a fast food place as a teen. I did it in my early 20s, basically. But anyway, so I did all of that a while ago, and then I started doing the art thing in addition to those types of things, And then recently, the art and design thing, it's got shit, really shit. My income, my annual income is basically decreasing by huge percentages year on year, and has been since about 2020. Part of that is increased competition on the internet. The internet's just getting bigger and bigger. Now I'm competing with people across the world. It's harder and harder to compete. Plus AI is a massive factor. Plus no one has any money. People are going through like an economic crisis, a recession, whether or not people are stating that we're living in a recession or not. No one has any money. People are struggling to survive, and buying artwork or art-related products, whether it's me selling stickers or T-shirts or mugs with my artwork on, like people don't have the money for it. They're just they're struggling to afford what it costs for a loaf of bread these days. So art and luxury items like that, it sort of takes a back seat. I appreciate that, but it doesn't help me when 2024 to 2025, where we're at now, my income has shrunk by I'd say 70%. So I'm earning basically 30% of what I was back then, and even back then I wasn't earning enough to be able to pay the bills. That's how I'm living at the minute. I'm struggling, and so one thing I thought I would do is go back to the whole, trying to find another job. I got a job working as a pizza delivery person again, and that, again, this was working in the pizza delivery company, the place that begins with P. And I was there for a couple of weeks, and then I guess you could say I got made redundant. What happened was the manager decided to ghost me, not give me any shifts, not answer my calls, just completely cut me off, and in part not fully pay me. And it took me chasing up, with leaving messages, dozens of text messages, till I finally got paid most of what I was due to get paid. Anyway, very stressful and very weird. And during that time, I ended up getting luckily finding another pizza delivery job. I say luckily, but perhaps we'll get to why. I'm not sure if that was the right terminology in a bit. But I got a little bit of work for another pizza company, pizza chain, one beginning with D, and I now work for this company doing delivery driving, and have done for a couple of weeks since. And what can I say about it? Well, the hours aren't great. So basically what happens is they have employed, I think, 25 delivery drivers to work in this particular franchise, this pizza franchise, which is about 30-minute drive from where I live. And that's a lot. And they basically have these very busy periods between sort of 4 o'clock and 8:30 in the evening. And they basically will get a load of drivers in, sometimes 5 drivers on a weekday, on a Wednesday, on a Friday they might get in 20 drivers, and you'll be one of them, basically fulfilling orders, picking up a bag full of pizzas, driving it to some address, now that it's winter, in the dark, trying to find numbered addresses when there sometimes aren't even numbers on the walls or doors. I won't get into the details, but there's some difficulties with the job, rain and cold and stuff like that. Now we're into winter, is not great. But the weird thing is, shift wise, like take last week for example, I had a 2-hour shift on one of the days I went into work. So I got there at say 4 o'clock. By 6 o'clock they said you can go home now, because we've already got like 10 other delivery drivers and we don't need half of them. So this particular company, I think they sign you up, they give like a load of shifts out, and then they play it by ear. They see if it's a busy night or a quiet night, and then they end up sending half the drivers home if it's a quiet night. Trouble is, if I've driven 30 minutes to get to work, I don't really want to have to be driving 30 minutes back and doing an hour round commute if I'm only given 2 hours of shifts. Because it gets to the point where it's like, there just isn't any point going into work, is there? So I kind of feel like, nah, that's a bit shit, really. There was another day where I did more hours, about 5-6 hours, which was good because the week prior I was generally getting about 3-hour shifts. And yeah, I seem to be working between sort of 10 to 13, 14 hours a week. But like I say, the hours, the shifts are so short that every time I'm having to do an hour round commute, and I'd rather go into a place of work, drive in there, do an 8 or 9 hour shift, maybe once or twice a day, and kind of get the part-time job out the way, rather than just keep having to go in for a couple of hours in an evening. It's so piecemeal and so kind of chopped up that it just feels half the time like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Obviously, minimum wage, you're not getting paid a lot. It's funny, I don't know if anyone knows this about pizza places. Like, you might have ordered a pizza to get delivered to your house, but behind the scenes, this is basically how it works with delivery drivers. So every time you get an order and you go to a place to deliver, it'll be within a sort of almost like a mile radius of that particular store. And if there's multiple franchise stores dotted about, they all have their territories, they all have their areas. You don't encroach on other, franchises, other pizza places' areas. So you do your drive. Typically it'll be up to about 3-mile drives, maybe sort of 10 to 12 minute drives tops, or something a bit shorter there between. And you get, in the UK at least, you get £1 for your delivery. That basically goes towards your fuel. And both the previous pizza delivery job I did from the place I will only name as somewhere that begins with P, and the new place where I'm working now, if that was the same sort of deal. If you go that little extra mile, or extra few miles, there's a few areas where they might top it up to like £1.40 or £1.50. So you get basically a little bonus per delivery. Now, as far as the fuel goes, I have a very economic car. It's just a little 1 litre runabout car. I had a better car that got smashed into and written off. I decided I would buy like a cheap little, easy to run runabout car in the meantime. But I'll save that for another story. So, despite that, I kind of worked out that fuel costs, the cost of gas, that basically costs me about 15 pence per mile. To my American friends, that's about 20 cents, which probably sounds ridiculous, but fuel costs over here are crazy bad. So yeah, you make a little bit on the fuel costs. So let's just say the actual fuel for a shift might cost me £10, but the actual money that I'll be paid will be £15. So you make a little bit back, you make an extra £5. The trouble is, when you factor in the wear of the tyres, the wear of the engine, the exhaust suspension, the paint work from, I don't know, chips and stuff on the road. Well, basically, I'm not even sure I'm going to make any money doing this job. If I end up, hitting a pothole that basically causes my suspension to go and I have to spend £600 to fix it, am I going to make any money from this job? But okay, that's beside that's something to worry about later. But yeah, you get £1 per delivery, and typically if I do an hour, I can do about 3 drops, depending on how far out we go. If they're all local drops, you could probably do like 5 or 6 within an hour. If they're more distance drops, if they're real distance drops, maybe just 2 drops an hour. It's going to take you like almost 15 minutes to get there, another 15 minutes to get back, another 15 minutes out, 15 minutes back. Anyway, that's basically the ins and outs of it. And it's, well, what can I say? What else can I say about this job? It's a bit shit. Partly that's because of the people I'm working with. I'm not really being given any solid training. My main point of contact, the supervisor slash manager that hired me, he just basically likes to sort of shout at me and tell me to do stuff that I haven't been trained to do, then gets annoyed when I perhaps don't do it as fast as I should. I'm fairly quick at learning this kind of stuff, and I'm sort of learning the patterns and the way that this particular store likes to do things, just through observing the other drivers and stuff. But I don't like the fact that I'm a very, going back to the big five personality model, I'm actually very high in this conscientious trait, which means I'm quite dutiful when I do a good job at stuff. So I do a good job, but you don't get praise where I work. You don't get a, good job. You did a good job today. Thanks for coming in, and I'm surprised how well you're doing considering you're new to the job. Or, there's no perks, there's no benefits. There's just do it quicker, do it better. I kind of feel like there's this constant pressure to be better, even though the fact that I'm pretty good at. I've only been doing it, like I say, at this particular place a couple of weeks, and there was a couple of weeks at that other place prior. But the job's going okay. I'm doing okay at it. But I don't like the fact that I feel as though I'm being treated like shit, basically, funnily enough. Who would have thought that would be something that people don't like? No, but you very much feel like, because they'll get like 20 drivers in, and sometimes there's too many drivers, and you just get sent home after a couple of hours if they don't need you. You really just feel like you're being kind of used so that they can get their stats up. I mean, I don't know this, but the kind of vibe I'm getting is that they, as a store, will get marked down on how quickly they fulfill orders and get them up. And I'm sure there's bonuses and stuff, for the managers if they can facilitate lots of quick orders. So it's worth them taking on high levels of extra staff in order to facilitate the rush period, so they get their times down, so they get them their own bonuses. Maybe not, I don't know. But what that means for drivers is you kind of just get treated like an indisposable cog in a machine that, we've got so many drivers, we don't really need you, but, okay, you're here now, so we'll give you a little bit of work. And when you're at work, you are just a worker. There's not really any small talk. Half the people that I work with aren't English, so they speak in other languages. I'm not really sure. Asian languages, West Asian, Hindi or whatever. I don't know what languages they speak, but I don't understand what's being said a lot of the time. What can I say? Some of the colleagues I work with, some of the other drivers seem pretty good, quite polite. I'm quite polite to them, and they're quite friendly towards me. Others that are quite rude towards me, and others that absolutely stink. They stink of body odour really badly. And there's times when you're not delivery driving and you're expected to kind of help in the shop, like cleaning or making pizza boxes, or just doing little odd jobs around the shop. There's this little storeroom in the back where most of the delivery drivers are sort of shoved into, where they're forced to make pizza boxes or stick labels on the front of these boxes and stuff. But there's a couple of the guys there, they stink really badly of BO. And if you're in a room with them, it's hell. It's horrible working in a stinky room, and you just think, I don't know. I wouldn't employ someone like that. I'd tell them, like, you got to sort this shit out, otherwise just don't come to work. But I'm not the boss. So yeah, we got some stinky people working there. We've got some rude people. We got some drivers as well that they just can't drive. You'll drive out the car park, you'll follow other drivers, and you'll watch them drive, and they won't indicate. They'll just cut in front of other vehicles and stuff, and they're not very good at their job. Yet they're also the drivers that, because they've been there a while, they'll sort of try and bully you about a little bit and make you do the shitty jobs that kind of they don't want to do or whatever. I don't know. Obviously, it's this type of job. It's, you know, it's a low paid shit job where you're going to get a mixture of people. Half of them, like I say, seem pretty good. They seem pretty decent people. But there's another half of people, unfortunately, the manager who sort of deals with me all the time, who's just a bit angry and aggressive and just unappreciative and no sort of people skills, and it just makes the job harder than it should be. You know, and some of these people, you know, I'm trying to sort of get a bit of small talk going. I'm quite introvert. I don't really like doing this small talk thing. But at the same time, I'm older. I'm not like a shy little quiet 17-year-old kid, which some of these are quite young, you know, and they don't really talk. And you know, I'll try and make conversation, and they'll just sort of like grunt at me or whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, right. Well, we're not going to be making friends anytime soon then. So anyway, I don't know. What can I say? This pizza job is a bit shit, really. At first, I kind of thought, you know, this isn't too bad. I feel like I can do this, and, you know, it helps get a bit of extra cash in the meantime. And I don't know, after a couple of weeks, I'm now at a point where I already think if something else comes along that's better, I'm just ready to leave this. I can't say that the actual act of driving a vehicle to deliver someone's pizza, I don't mind that as a job. Like, just if all jobs in the world just paid the same, as far as this being like a fun job or a good job, the actual work, you know, I'd probably rank it sort of halfway between good and shit. But what makes it bad is just, I think, the sort of lack of management, or sort of the people I'm around. And maybe as I get to know people, you know, I realise that they're not just grumpy, angry bastards. They just don't know me yet, and that's how they act with new people. I don't know, but yeah, my feeling is that I don't really want to. I don't really want to be here full time, and I'm already ready to leave. And I've only been doing this for like a couple of weeks at this particular place, so not good. But the thing is, I don't even feel like I'm going to miss out much, because if I'm working minimum wage and I'm only getting, say, 10 hours of shifts a week, it's like, well, what can I do with that money anyway? I mean, you can't live off of it. You can't pay any bills out of it. You know, it's kind of one of these types of jobs, like, unless you can get sort of 60 or 70 hours of shifts, like, you just have to realise that it is kind of just supplementary pocket money work, and it's no real career or anything. So anyway, basically I said to myself, right, I'll do it now. I'll deal with kind of being treated a bit like shit, and I'll deal with the kind of the ego damage to know that I'm someone who's in his 40s and doing a job which, you know, typically you'd have as a first job, teenagers or whatever. And because that's the thing, like, one of the supervisors, one of the other managers, not the one that I typically deal with directly, but he's actually quite a nice guy, this other manager. But he's young, he's 19, he's been working there since he's 16, and he, you know, I'm like, well, like, he's my boss, you know, and he's a manager, and it's like he's like way above me and I'm way below him, and nothing wrong with that, but it's kind of just a bit of a weird thing when, like, if it just came down to life experience, not to like blow my own horn or anything, but I know I have a lot of it, and it's kind of weird when you've got kids basically bossing you around and telling you what to do, and it just feels weird. You kind of feel like when you're older, when you're in your 40s, you should be beyond this shit. It's just that feeling you get. I don't know whether that's justified or not, but that's sort of it's just a feeling that kind of comes along for the ride. But so anyway, I just thought I'd update with the whole job situation, since I've sort of spoke about it in previous videos. And yeah, luckily I remembered my microphone this one, so unlike the last 3 videos, which I almost didn't upload since the audio was so shit, I thought I'll throw it up anyway, so they're there. People people don't watch my videos anyway. This is only going to get like 3 or 4 views, so it doesn't even matter. So, but if the YouTube gods ever decided to share my content with a wider audience, then, you know, perhaps one day someone's going to come back to this old video and think, oh, okay, well, thank you, sir, for having slightly better audio on this particular video. I appreciated that. But yeah, just a quick one about YouTube and YouTube videos for anyone that doesn't know, for anyone that doesn't put out YouTube content themselves. YouTube videos that gain popularity, the ones that get millions of views, it's not a meritocratic system. It's not like necessarily that they are better videos. And I'm not saying that this is a good this particular video or any videos that I put out are particularly worthy of millions of views, but I'm aware of the fact that when you have, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of YouTube videos going up every day, and yeah, you have hundreds of thousands of people potentially watching YouTube videos, but YouTube only wants to show you the types of videos that it thinks will hold your attention better, that are more entertaining, that are more structured in a way that's going to be good for you. And 90+% of YouTube videos that get uploaded to YouTube don't end up really getting views, likes, subscribes, attention in general. It's just the way it is. I'm not complaining about it, I'm just talking about it. And so occasionally what YouTube does is kind of throws small channels content out to a wider audience to see if it can hit. And it's almost like a lottery. It's like winning the lottery. You have these viral videos. You know, even semi-successful YouTubers can have more viral videos. You know, they could be used to having 20,000 views on a video, but then suddenly one gets 2 million views. So we can all enjoy the luxuries of YouTube, the YouTube gods granting us with higher view counts. But basically, I've come to terms with the fact that for my particular type of content, I feel like there's probably a small audience that would actually quite like the weird shit that I just rant about and would be interested in some of my takes on life and how things are going with me, given my predicaments and, you know, the rest of it. I'm not going to find that audience until the YouTube gods decide to sort of throw me that extra amount of viewers or impressions, as they call it. So when I put out a video, YouTube will give it, say, 40 impressions. So that means it will show up in 40 news feeds, you know, front pages of people's profiles. And then out of that, let's just say 4 people, you know, 10% go on to actually click the video and watch the video. Until YouTube gives me like 400,000 impressions, you know, my videos are never going to get 10% of 400,000. You know, that's, what is that? Is that 40,000 views? Something like that. Maths isn't my strong point, but anyway. So yeah, you're very much relying on that kind of algorithmic kind of not gamble, but blessing, I suppose, from YouTube in order to get the hits. So what I'm doing basically now is just putting stuff out there. It's not the highest quality content. It doesn't have loads of edits and B-roll. I'm doing a talking head video, but yeah, I'm just going to keep doing this, and I'm going to do it for the 2 or 3 people that, you know, come across what I'm talking about, find it interesting, you know, find that there's some value in it. And, you know, maybe I'll get the blessing at some point, maybe not. We'll see how it goes. But either way, you know, this is what's going on for me. This is what I'm thinking about. And hope things are going well for you. And I'll see you again in a future video.